Zoning Board of Appeals. The board does not write the zoning ordinance, but does have the authority to grant relief from it where practical difficulty or unnecessary hardship would result. The board will vote on each agenda item following a public hearing. Use variance requests require a minimum of 6 affirmative votes in order to grant the requested variance. We do not have any of those this evening. Non-use variance requests require a minimum of 5 affirmative votes in order to grant the variance. If you would like to request that the board table or adjourn your case due to the absence of a full board, which is the case this evening, one of our members moved out of state, so we only have 8 members instead of our normal 9. You must inform the chairperson immediately following the public hearing. Petitioners shall do their best to limit their presentations to 10 minutes. Each participant in the public hearing shall do their best to limit their comments to 3 minutes. With that being said, I'm looking for the first order of business this evening, which is the approval of the minutes for the September 14th, 2017 meeting.
Motion to approve.
I'll support.
Moved, supported. Any discussion, additions, deletions? Not seeing any, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Absolutely. We don't have any old business this evening, so that moves us down to our first item of new business, item D1, which is case number 171035, public hearing on the appeal of Castler Construction, Inc. Petitioner and Susan and Robert Dockstadt are owners for the following variance. Waive 279 square feet of the maximum allowable accessory ground floor area of 800 square feet to permit construction of a 375 square foot addition to an existing 700 square foot attached accessory structure, a garage located at 1806 Vinton Road. Mr. Murphy.
This property is located in the one-family residential large lot zoning district. It is a rather large lot. It's approximately 1/3 of an acre, and it's improved with a single-family home and an attached 704 square foot garage. You can see on the photograph in front of you the attached garage, and you'll see the space to the rear and the rear yard. I'll reference the site plan. The petitioner is proposing to add an addition to the rear of the existing attached garage, which is highlighted in the darker shade in the graphic on the screen. The addition would increase the attached garage by 375 square feet. The zoning ordinance allows for a maximum of 800 square feet of floor area dedicated to accessory space or the garage. The resulting, with the addition, the garage would be well over that. It would be at 1,079 square feet. While it exceeds the 800 square feet, it would only be a proposed 7.45% of total lot coverage, well below the 10%, but in this case, the maximum takes effect before the 10%. So the petitioner is seeking a waiver of from the 800 square foot requirement to construct the addition to the attached garage.
Are there any questions for staff at this point? All right, not seeing any. Are the petitioners present? Please come forward.
Hi, my name's Tamis Donaldson, and I'm the architect. I'm from Royal Oak and also practicing in Royal Oak, and I'm here with Rick Castler, who's also from Royal Oak. He is the builder, and he has his business in Colossa, Michigan, Castler Construction. And the owner is also here, Bob Dockstadt, and he and his wife are just moving from Ann Arbor. They have a current 4-car garage, so they're used to the 4-car garage. They're living in Ann Arbor, retiring to Royal Oak, so Royal Oak is their retirement town. And so we are here to request a waiver for a garage to increase the size for a 4-car garage to house their existing 4 cars. And they are car collectors, and that is what it comes down to. This is the kind of a hot rod city, and they have collector cars. So rather than having them parked in the garage and having the everyday cars out in the parking in front of the garage, this would allow for all parking to be in the garage at night. So the addition is based on not infringing upon the front elevation whatsoever. It's all going towards the back, but we're maintaining the existing form of the garage, and we're maintaining the existing materials. Any other questions?
I'm assuming the cars would be parked inside the garage, side by side, stadium style?
Stadiums, yeah,
Yeah.
yep. Collectors go in, they get parked, and then the day-to-day cars go in and after them.
Yes, sir.
I'm just curious, so the hardship is they have a lot of cars?
The hardship,
I just want to be clear, so.
yeah,
that I
no, the
understand.
hardship is, no, that's just, the
What
hardship
is the hardship?
The hardship is that they have a generous piece of property, and the hardship is that even, we are under all the allowable for the entire house, and we're under the allowable for the accessory, and so,
I don't
by
see
doing the
that- I don't see
addition.
that on my hardship list. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for the petitioner? Did you have anything else you wanted to add at this point?
Let me see if my team has anything. We're all set, thank you.
All right, then I'll ask you to take a seat so I can go ahead and open up the public hearing. Is there anybody in the audience who would like to address the ZBA on this matter? All right,
Good evening. My name is Beverly Skelly, and I live at 1800 Vinton Road, next door. And I'm having my son-in-law speak for me, because I can't get it out. This is, speak, Steve Cleary. Okay?
Sure. You can sit down if you want.
Can I?
Pardon?
Well, you can sit down if you want, if you're more
Okay.
comfortable.
Okay.
Okay. Good evening. I'll be brief, but I'll read it, if you don't mind, in first person what my mother-in-law wrote, because I think it's succinct to the point, expresses two concerns as she poses a contest of this request for variance. My mother-in-law lives immediately next door to the east. Her concern and contention with the appeal request is based on the nature of what a large, solid, fixed structure would create from a vantage standpoint from her property. Essentially, her backyard to the left would become 25 feet or so to the wall of this garage would look like. The concern and contention is based on what this large structure would look like. Essentially, it would be an eyesore and a hardship for her. There are photographs we brought to the current view, so you can get a sense of how the neighborhood flows to the backgrounds to Woodward Avenue from her
so if you
house.
want to hand those to Ms. Anderson,
Certainly.
she'll pass them around the table.
Sure.
And I'll go ahead and stop your time here while you do that.
Yep.
Thank you for doing that.
Close-ups from the den as well as just eye aspect panoramics for objectivity. In addition, if the appeal for variance is approved, my mother-in-law would also want to seek some assurances that, from a grading perspective, if a structure is erected, that it wouldn't further degrade the scenario that occurs, which in the northwest portion of her lot line, which butts up against the corner of the neighbor's lot line, there's already a lot of drainage that goes in that area and renders that corner of her yard fairly unusable. So the concern would be if a structure comes out and has to be accounted for, does that extend the grade to the extent that it would, from our standpoint, present an even greater problem for drainage than it exists now? There's already a current runoff issue from that property in the springtime. Basically, spring occurs at about June 1st in my mother-in-law's backyard due to the collection of water that drains down from the neighborhood on the grade. She's in the low spot of the grade. A little bit more so since the construction was done on the home last year, too. So would be concerned that there'd be if this is approved, would be some remedy for her such that if there's a problem, that she wouldn't have to pay for the correction of the grade issue. I don't know if the pictures will show the grade exactly, but it's fairly dramatic. It's 2.5 to 3 foot drop. And to restate the reality of the eyesore concern, in the appeal letter, it was stated that the construction, while appealing, looking certainly from an architectural standpoint, would not be an eyesore for people walking by, nor the neighbor to the west. What the letter didn't state was the neighbor to the east it would be an eyesore for. So there is an implication that the structure itself does present itself as an eyesore to certain directions, west and to the street facing, but my mother-in-law felt like that consideration wasn't extended to the east. In fact, she'd be most affected by it. She'd be closest to it, And her view, which now extends, the neighborhood that they live in, the backyards are sort of a channel and tunnel, just like the streets are. You can see blocks down some of these backyards, and that wouldn't be the case any longer. My mother-in-law retired 20 years ago, or 25 years ago, and has been in Royal Oak as a retiree in that home for over 20 years. And that's where she spends her days, is in her backyard and on her back den porch. So that is the general sense of why we're here tonight, to raise those concerns.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate that.
Thank you very much.
Is there anybody else who would like to speak this evening? All right, not seeing any, I will go ahead and close the public hearing and bring it back to this side of the table for any questions, discussions. Ms. Anderson?
I'm in the mindset of Alan right here. I'm just not seeing a hardship. And I absolutely think that the design is beautiful and everything like that. I'm just not seeing a hardship at this time.
Yeah, I don't believe it meets any of their criteria, but it uses less than the permitted square footage for the attached garage. Not the square footage, but the coverage. It's only 7% instead of 10%. And originally, my feeling was nobody's going to see it, but now we do have a neighbor that is concerned about what her view will be. So I'm not sure on this one.
Yes, sir.
I'm torn too, but going through the normal criteria, I'm looking at it, it's can go somewhat either way in certain chapters. Restriction unreasonably prevent the owner from using the property for a permitted purpose. No, they can still park their cars in the driveway and leave their collectors in the garage. Variance would do substantial justice to the applicant as well as other property owners in the district. And a lesser relaxation would not give substantial relief to the property of the owner or others. While it will get the cars out of the driveway, which could be considered an eyesore by some, giving that extension onto the back, as the one neighbor to the east, at most effects, she contends that it will, even though actually looking at her picture, it looks like most of it would be blocked by the one tree there. But still, she has that contention, so that's a little bit there. The third one, the plight of the landowner is due to a unique circumstance of the property. That one I do agree, this is a larger size lot, and they're held to what our typical lots are. So that one I sort of do agree with, even though Alan and Ms. Anderson do not. And then the alleged hardship has not been created by any other person having an interest in the property. That large lot is already there. They haven't created that, although they have created it by trying to go above and beyond what's normally requested. So I am torn, just like the rest of you, but I can somewhat see their view too at the same time.
Actually, if I could ask Mr. Murphy, there was a question brought up about the grade change and properly addressing the draining. If this were approved and during the permitting process, would that be addressed by City Hall? What's the procedure for that?
We don't require drawings for the petitioner or for anyone to provide drawings to illustrate what the elevations currently are before they do their improvements and post. So unfortunately for the petitioner, there is no ordinance requirement that would prohibit this individual from changing the grade of their property, whether they do this improvement or they don't. They wanted to change the grade of the property tomorrow for their own purposes of garden or their own drainage, they could certainly do that. Obviously, it would be in their best interest to work with their neighbor, and seeing as though they're both here, I think that might be a wise opportunity for them to discuss it, but there's no ordinance that would prohibit anyone from changing the grade of their property at any point in time.
Excellent. I think I saw Mr. Muller.
Yeah.
Did you have your hands up?
Yeah, I'm somewhat troubled when there's a double requirement like this. We can't be over 800 square feet, and we can't be over a certain lot coverage. Somehow or another, if you make one but you don't make the other, it doesn't mean somehow, oh, I fell through the cracks on something. I mean, it could almost work the other way to where, yes, I could put the 800 square foot in, but I'd be over that coverage. Well, then it would be like, you know, you can't do that. And I somewhat disagree with Anthony's comment on, let me, plight of the landowners. Now the mind has left what I was going to talk about. Yeah, I'm sorry about that, but, yeah, I don't see where there's any, oh, it was the large lot business. Since we don't tie that 800 square foot size, maximum size garage to a big lot or small lot, then I don't see where you can call the large lot, you know, something that, oh, since I have this, I should be able to go bigger. For whatever reason, zoning decided we didn't want garages bigger than 800 square feet, whether you had a 5-acre lot or a 1/4-acre lot. And so that doesn't hit me as a good argument, so I just wanted to bring that up.
Did you want to chime back in? No. Oh, I thought you had something to say. Mr. Clapp.
I mean, I do think it's a very thoughtful design. I think the applicant tied this into the home well. I also appreciate they pointed out the fact that they looked at another option. They looked at possibly raising the roof line and using lifts in the garage. And to me, that seems to be detrimental to the existing home to raise that piece up. It wouldn't complement it well. So I do appreciate you explored other options, and this seems to be the best to get what you're looking for here.
Mr. Kroll.
I was really not trying to be a smart aleck when I asked the question about the hardship being cars, because obviously cars aren't a hardship. One of the problems I have, and by the way, if we're truly going to stick to the letter of the law in variances, they need to pass all 4 of those, not one. And they certainly, maybe we could slide them by on one of the 4, maybe. One of my big problems with this is that variances go with the house, not the people living in it. And all too often, the next people that buy it don't have 4 or 6 cars, and all of a sudden it becomes home office or something else. And there have been many cases and many lawsuits in Metro Detroit of large garages and what happens with them eventually. So I have a 2-car garage that's 400 square feet or 450 square feet. They're currently almost at 800. I really can't support a larger garage, and I would like to make a motion to deny this.
Well,
Motion by Mr.
support.
Kroll, supported by Ms. Anderson. Any additional discussion on the motion? Well, I will say, me personally, I like this, and there's a big part of me that wants to vote for it, but when I go back and put my planning commission hat on the board I previously served on, we actually did have that discussion about tying bigger garages to the large lots to accommodate 3- and 4-car garages, and I lost that vote. So even though there's a big part of me that would like to see this happen, and to me it makes a lot of sense for a lot of reasons, the planning commission in their wisdom chose to stick with that standard, and as a result of that, even though I fundamentally disagree with it, I'm going to uphold that choice. So if there's no further discussion, I will go ahead and call for the vote. All those in favor of denying the variance request signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
Nay.
2 nays.
6-2, motion passes.
I'm sorry about that, and thank you, folks. All right, so that moves us on to case number, our new business item D2, case number 171036. Public hearing on the appeal of Paul Malinick, petitioner and owner for the following variances. A, waive 23% from the requirement that an attached garage accessory structure be no greater than 50% of the total width of the front facade of the structure. B, waive 13.37 feet of the maximum 7 feet that an attached garage accessory structure may project from the nearest point of the living space on the ground floor. And C, waive 5 feet of the maximum allowable driveway width of 25 feet at the property line to permit construction of a 2-story single-family dwelling with an attached garage accessory building that dominates the front facade and projects further into the front yard than the ground floor of the dwelling located at 222 Campbell Road.
I think you pretty much read the whole report. That was all.
All right, then go right by you.
The petitioner is proposing to construct a 2-story single-family home with an attached garage. And the attached garage, as you can see in the elevation on the screen in front of you, is 73% of the total width of the entire structure. The zoning ordinance only allows for an attached garage to be 50% of the front facade, so they're seeking a waiver from that standard. Additionally, the attached garage projects out from the front face of the house on the ground floor, and I'll refer to the floor plan. The attached garage projects out from the start of the ground floor living space, the foyer, projects out over 20 feet, or essentially the depth of a parking space. The ordinance only allows for an attached garage to project no more than 7 feet from the ground floor living space of the home. So they're seeking a waiver from that provision. And lastly, I'll refer to the survey. The dark shaded area represents the proposed driveway that leads to the attached garage, and the driveway width at the property line is 30 feet. The zoning ordinance only allows for a driveway to be 25 feet wide at the property line, so they're seeking a waiver to have, we'll say, an extra wide driveway at the property line. The curb cut isn't appropriately reflected on this survey, but it would flare out to be even larger than 30 feet at the curb line in the public right-of-way.
Any questions for staff at this point? All right, not seeing any. Are the petitioners present?
Question, sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't see your hand, I apologize.
Mr. Murphy, for lots that are less than 45 feet wide, side yard setbacks, is that a total of 12, minimum of 4 on one side? For lots less than 45?
If there is an attached garage,
Is that 3?
it can be 4 on each side.
Okay,
If there's a detached garage to the rear or simply a driveway alongside the home, the driveway side would need to be at least 8, the non-driveway side would need to be at least 4. In this case, the driveway leads straight to a garage, so the house with the attached garage may have side setbacks of no less than 4 feet on each side.
okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Are the petitioners present? Yeah, please come forward. Introduce yourself and tell us about your plan, sir.
My name is Paul Mlinick. I'm the owner of 222 South Campbell. I brought my builder with me from Newmark Building, Alessandro Palazzolo. I come seeking a variance for the greater than 50% of the garage being the front of the building. There are several other homes in the area that have, I brought some examples, that have greater than 50% also. There's a couple newer homes. So I wanted to share those with you if I might.
Yeah, absolutely. Hand
Okay,
them
some
to Ms.
totals.
Anderson, she'll hand them around.
This one, the garage, I believe, is 20 feet, and then the other portion of the home is 60 feet. So that's greater than 50, and then that one is also. Part of the report, it says that the garage or the accessory structure dominates the front feature of the building. And while I agree it's a large width of the building, we feel though it's integrated into the building nicely. It shares the same roof line as the rest of the house does, so it's not a separate portion. It's built in. As far as the proposal for the maximum of 7 feet extending out, we decided we'd be able to move the steps out under the covered porch a little bit further if necessary, to closing that 7-foot gap. But we consider it just a covered porch that's part of it, not added to the whole separate entryway. And as far as the property being 45 feet wide and having a 30-foot wide driveway, due to the fact that the house is on a busy road, it's on Campbell Road, which is a more trafficked road than a normal side street. There's no parking available on the side street there on Campbell. There's no side street parking. I have a personal vehicle, and my fiance has a personal vehicle, and I work in law enforcement. I have to have a take-home vehicle for that, and so I need 3 cars to be able to fit onto the garage structure or the driveway structure because there's no parking on the side of the building. And additionally, as far as the garage being a wider portion, as I mentioned, it's on a busier road, so the noise level is a little higher than a normal side street. So in essence, the garage kind of acts as a noise buffer from the busy traffic. So if you'd consider that, please.
Any questions for the petitioner at this point? Yes, sir.
You've got basically a blank slate right now, and there's been many other developers that have came before us with lots that are smaller than yours, 40 feet wide, and have gotten it to work without needing any of these variances. What is the hardship that you need to meet these variances that they didn't?
I think a large one is just the fact that it's on a busy road and turning in and out. I've seen homes that have a single car driveway leading to the garage, for example, in the back of the house. To back out onto a busy road, I think that's an added danger. That's not necessarily something I want for myself or family or visitors or whomever would be at the house, just because it's a busy road there. And additionally, with the noise that the road produces, just having that kind of sound buffer from that.
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
How do you not have to back out onto a busy road if the garage is right there at the road?
Well, if the cars are in the garage, ma'am, there's enough pad where you can do like a Y-turn and be able to pull out. If there's cars parked and then there's one car kind of adjacent to the side, there's enough to back out into the rest of the pad and then pull out front ways.
Mr. Chair, that is why I was questioning the setbacks. Like, for example, if you had an attached rear yard garage that was side turned, if that was positioned closer to the side yard, you could essentially pull up the driveway, pull into the garage, then back out, and then come forward off the street. So that's why I was questioning the side yard setback, because I think you could achieve that and place the garage behind the home and then comply.
Well, I mean, in essence, though, I mean, as we all know, Royal Oak lots are fairly small for the most part. That just, in essence, takes away about half of the backyard to build a backyard garage. And the lot's not massive as it is. It's 45 feet wide by about 150 feet. So to build a garage in the backyard cuts the garage or the backyard in about half. So that would be the purpose of having that. And like I said, it's on a busy road, so I don't plan on spending much time in the front because it's on the busy road. So I'd like enough room in the back to be able to entertain or do, things like that. Have a little privacy. So.
Any other questions? Not seeing any. I'm going to ask you to take a seat real quickly, if you would, sir, and open up the public hearing. Is there anybody in the audience that would like to address the ZBA on this issue? Not seeing any. I will go ahead and close the public hearing and bring it back to this side. Mr. Kroll?
I have a question for Joe. We had somebody in front of us, one of the builders, and I can't remember exactly what the variant, I don't know if it was a variance or it was a statement. I can't remember the outcome, but it seems like it was related to this.
It wasn't, it was how our office applies that definition of the ordinance, the 50%. And we were, I'll point you to the screen here, and I'll show you. This garage here is entirely square. The previous applicant that was in conversation with us had proposed an attached garage that was exactly 50 feet at the building line, and then tiny ways in, it went way out, and that's when we said, no, that's not the intent. We're measuring it at its widest point of of that portion of the structure itself, not at the building line, and the board had said we would prefer the building line. That's not applicable in this case.
Did you want to follow up, or?
Well, I almost feel like I should abstain from this because this is kind of my house. And I love it quite a bit, and I think it's kind of a dumb rule we put into effect. So I understand we're up here to protect the laws as they're written, but I think this one's written wrong, just my personal opinion.
Any other questions or comments? Mr. Curtis?
I was gonna, Joseph, I think the existing structures, even though this extends forward a little more than the ordinance calls, well, significantly more than the ordinance allows, it doesn't seem to, from this drawing, extend beyond the existing houses next door. Does that seem right, the way you look at this
Let's take a look.
site plan?
Let's take a look. It appears as though, once it comes into focus, it appears as though there their nearest point of their structure, which is the attached garage,
Right.
appears to be fairly in line with the nearest point of the homes adjacent, which are, I'm assuming, are going to be your traditional front entry door. So not a garage door, but a front entry door, front portion of the house.
Thank you.
Mr. Oak?
I'm going to make a motion to deny the variances requested.
We have a motion,
I'll support.
supported.
Basically, although I do appreciate their design and what they're trying to do, they got a blank slate here. All these variances that they're bringing before us are basically of their own doing. We've seen multitude other buildings on smaller lots build successfully nice homes. And although this is on a busier road, you have all these other homes that are there that seem to have no problems with backing out onto the road either. So because of that, I can't see how any of he has any hardships that meet the variance that they request, so.
Ms. Zukin, any follow-up on your side?
No, I agree with what Mr. Ophek says. Also, although you brought in some pictures of houses that have similar designs, there's not any on Campbell that I noticed. I just, I hate to say this because Mr. Kroll has the same house, but it makes it look more like an alley than the front of a house. So I have objections to it, and it hasn't met any of the 4 criteria for variances, so that's why I'm opposing it.
Yes, ma'am.
I just want to add one thing, that 150-foot lot depth is quite substantial. Mine isn't that deep. And I think that there's plenty of room to put a garage in the back and even have the turning radius that is requested there, so.
Mr. Muller?
When the zoning laws were written, it's somewhat obvious because of this rule that it was decided that we didn't want houses that looked like the entire front was a garage door. That is one, he had a couple, I thought, good points if I was rewriting zoning law, in that on a busy street, having this garage in front like this would be a sound barrier to the house. I thought that was very interesting. I hadn't heard that before. But we're not rewriting the zoning law. And as Anthony said, it's a new construction. I hate to start out with the first thing we build is a non-conforming structure. You've got the ability to figure something that fits the rules, and there isn't anything odd with the shape of the lot besides being on a busy street, and that doesn't really affect those things, or there's nothing in the zoning that gives a different category. If you live on a busy street, you can have this and this, but you're not allowed to otherwise. So I can't support this
Yes, sir.
request. As much as I don't want to, I will be joining and agreeing with the denial. And it's obvious why I don't agree with it. I think in fairness, it's the privacy, the noise. I don't live in a front porch community. And therefore, I really don't need a front porch. I really like the privacy of what goes on behind me, and that's kind of where everybody entertains in my neighborhood. So I think this broad brush that you can do this or you can't do this, I think needs to be looked at by the planning. But in fact, we're not here to do that tonight, so I will be joining under protest, I might add.
Any other comments? A question, Mr. Murphy. Isn't this stretch of Campbell going to be going on a road diet in sometime in the relatively near future to accommodate bike lanes?
I know that was the conversation. I don't know the final outcome. We looked at
Okay.
a lot of roads. I don't remember the exact outcome.
I thought that I'd read that it would be extended up Campbell to connect with the bike lanes that currently exist on the Ferndale side.
I believe that may be the case. I don't know that for an absolute fact, though.
Yeah, this was another one of those matters that we actually talked about at the Plan Commission going back, geez, it had to be 10 years ago again, give or take. And there was a couple examples of how homes that really sort of drove the desire to get away from this type of design. I think you do raise some very valid points. I think that the points that you raised, like I said, they are valid, but I think they're also going to be addressed. I can speak with relative certainty. I don't want to say 100%, but I do believe the stretch of Campbell in front of you is going to be going down to 3 lanes and 2 bike lanes as opposed to its current configuration. I don't know if there's going to be additional slowing of traffic, but I think the hardship that you mentioned in terms of dealing with getting out of Campbell hopefully will rectify itself, given when that road diet takes place. Are there any other comments? All right, not seeing any, I will call for the vote on the motion, which is to deny the variance request. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Thank you, sir. And that moves us on to item number D3, case number 171037, public hearing on the appeal of C Investment Group LLC petitioner and Alan R. Burnham, trust owner, for the following variance. Waive 9 of the minimum required 12 off-street parking spaces to permit expansion of a one-story commercial building and establish retail sales, professional offices, and/or a carry-out restaurant with tenants located at 28168 Woodward Avenue. Mr. Murphy.
This was at the Planning Commission in August, and they approved the site plan to construct an approximately 600 square foot addition to the rear of the building. You'll notice from the aerial and the photographs, there's an outbuilding back there now. That'll be removed, but there'll be a 600 square foot addition to the rear of the building, and that'll provide for a common hallway and shared restrooms for the 2 tenant spaces. One of those tenant spaces has been identified as a carry-out restaurant, and the other with the opportunity for either retail or professional office. Based on those uses, they require 12 off-street parking spaces, and the site provides for 1 barrier-free van-accessible parking space and 2 standard parking spaces at the rear, which are accessed via the alley. So they're seeking a waiver from the minimum parking standard. You'll also notice that there's parking adjacent to the building, but that's within the Bassett Avenue, or Bassett Road public right-of-way, so we can't count that towards on-street parking. But there is adjacent parking within the right-of-way of Bassett, as well as Woodward Avenue.
Well, oh, I'm sorry. What is the current parking requirement for the frame shop?
We recognize that as retail, so someone could occupy that space or split it into 2 tenant spaces as traditional retail sales. So they've identified essentially making 2 spaces, keeping one of those retail and making the other carry-out restaurant, which is a little bit higher parking count.
No, but what's the requirement now? If a frame shop moved in there, what would the requirement be?
It would be something that we would administratively approve. There would be no different from the previous use.
So they wouldn't need to bring any more parking?
That's correct. It's only the factor of them adding the carry-out restaurant, which is again slightly higher than either traditional retail sales or a professional office. With seating, a restaurant would require much more parking, but a carry-out restaurant.
So the addition has no impact, it's just the change of use that is bringing this?
Yes, the addition is non-usable floor area in our eyes since it serves as a common hallway and restrooms for the tenant spaces. It takes up additional land that they may have otherwise, I don't know, rearranged and made maybe 1 or 2 more parking spaces, but in order to create 2 tenant spaces and the hallway and the restrooms and things of that nature, as you know, it's arguably easier to simply add a small addition to the rear of the building.
Even without that, you can't gain additional parking based on the number from east to west, you can't gain parking?
Probably not. You could do stadium-style parking, but we wouldn't recognize it.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
So the parking that's on the north side of the building along Bassett is not counted towards the
Because it's not
available
owned by the
parking?
petitioner, so anyone's capable of parking there, and people have been, especially since it's improved.
Yeah, any other questions?
And really, there's no, none of those stores own any of the parking, right? The Carpet Store, Honors, all the people on that run, all those spaces are public in front too, right?
That is correct. That's owned by the Michigan Department of Transportation.
Sir.
Joseph, do you know who does own that parking that's right along Bassett
Public.
Public?
It's within the public right away, just like Woodward Avenue. Anyone's free to park there.
Okay.
Any duration. No one can put up any signs.
So basically, like in the past where sometimes there's been we'll buy lease spaces from someone else to satisfy our parking, they definitely can't do this because it's public.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
Any other questions? Not seeing any. Are the petitioners present?
Good evening.
Yes, sir.
Sergio Besnagin from SEA Investment Group. How you guys doing tonight? Couple things. One, and I know Mr. Kroll, when he was asking that question, if first of all, if it was split into two, and the difference between that and a carryout restaurant, the difference is only 1 or 2 parking spaces, because the carryout restaurant's only 1,300 square feet. So the total square footage between them, if you look at that drawing, it's going to be a very small carryout restaurant on the corner, and the remainder is going to be just retail or office. Now, a couple of things. What's unique about this property, if you look at it, first of all, obviously, everything on Woodward, you're looking at it with different eyes than you look at anywhere else. But this is one of the only ones that does have 8 parking spaces that are adjacent to it. So yes, it's in the right of way, but technically, it looks like any other parking lot, just because of the fact that we don't own that. At the end of the day, the city does not plow that. It's going to get plowed by us. So technically, yeah, the city owns it, but they don't service that property. So that's one. And so if you count both of them, there's 11 spaces there. And the planning board did unanimously vote on it, and none of them had an exception to that. So if you look at the spirit of the charter, and if you look at the requirements, this actually meets that. The only difference is that the parking that's right there just happens to be right-of-way parking. But one thing that, and that's why we brought it up to the board as well, is that when you look at that property, it has the biggest setback out of any property all up and down Woodward. All other properties, like where you see the street that comes up, the building and the property line, I think is anywhere between 5 and maybe 10 feet in. This thing, I think it goes about almost 25, 30 feet in. So it looks like it belongs to that property, and it doesn't look like any of the other streets. All the other streets, basically the street comes up and the building property line is right there. So it's, I don't know why it was originally done that way, but basically it cuts in and it leaves a super, super wide area that is actually right of way. But basically, for all pedestrians and everybody who's driving by, it looks like it belongs to that building.
Any questions for the petitioner? Mr. Olfak?
Do you have a tenant lined up already or potentially lined up
No,
depending upon this?
we're talking to a couple minor tenants, but they're going to be like normal sub shops and stuff like that. Nothing major, but it's going to be strictly carry out. And that's why it's not an even split. It's not like we're asking for, let's say the total square footage with the addition is 3,000 square feet. But if you take obviously the space behind it, we're looking at 70% of it being retail or office and just the corner 30%. So we can guarantee you that it's not going to be bigger than that. It's going to be 1,000 to 1,200 square feet for the carryout restaurant, and the remainder is going to be the other one. And again, if we have the ability to split it, if you look at really the parking difference between that 1,000 or 1,200, it's only 1 space difference.
Any other questions? Yes, ma'am.
The building currently is vacant, correct?
I'm sorry, ma'am?
Currently, the building is vacant?
Currently it's vacant, and we're going to do a full renovation to the whole front, to the back. We're taking that sign, the board didn't want that art sign there, that's going to get removed.
Do you know who's using all that parking right now? Because when I drove past there, that public right-of-way spot was quite filled up, surprisingly.
Where there's times where it's filled, there's times that it's empty. It depends on the rest of the block and obviously.
I only went through during the day.
Oh, during the day? I mean, there's times where there's people were vacating out. They just recently actually just got out. So there were some times where the people that were in there came in and they had to empty out some of their things. I mean, there's been times when I drove by and I don't see any cars there, but there have definitely been times when I drive by and I see 5 cars there, so.
Any other questions?
And then we are obviously, the one thing we are doing too with the space, currently there is no parking in the rear of the building. We are demoing that whole unit in the back, so we are adding to the current space, we are adding 3 spaces in the back. So as you look at it now, there's the parking on the side and no parking in the back. We are demolishing the building and basically like the outhouse back there that's for storage and creating those 3 spaces. And as Jeff had mentioned too, you can't add any more than that. We tried looking at if we didn't add it, if we could squeeze in a 4th space, but you can't put in another space because the only option is to go the way that's parked like that, and you can't put it in on a horizontal coming in and going out because it doesn't give enough space for in between for a passing lane.
Any other questions? Yes, ma'am.
I see 2 cars parked behind it. You're saying that,
Those are not legal. It's not enough space. In the picture, you see it?
yeah.
That's not enough space for that. So those, right now, if you look at it, it's actually a legal parking space, the way we have it designed. If you look at, I mean, you could put a car back there, you can park in the alley, but those are not, they don't meet the requirements for a normal parking space. And again, the main thing is that those, even though it says that we only are providing 3 on-site parking, technically, you look at it, there's 11 parking spaces there. And obviously, all the parking in the front, which is, there's, I think, 5 in the front of our building, too.
Any other questions?
Well, I just wanted to point out, you keep saying there was 1, but in our documents here, it says that the former tenant needed 10 spaces. So there's actually 2.
Yeah,
With the-
I said one to two, but
Right.
what I'm saying is that, correct, the one thing is the way it stands now, it doesn't conform to parking requirement if you don't include that side one anyway, but none of the ones on Woodward, I mean, there's a carpet store that's, I think, a block down the road, that's, I think, 5,000 square feet, and all it has is the 4 parking spaces in front of it. So none of them meet the requirement. So if you just look at not having that thing, you'd still need 10 to 11 spaces for the space of the building that it is currently right now.
Anything else?
And again, the main thing is it's not creating a newer hardship, because if you look at the difference between the spaces, and again, it does have those spaces on the side. Yes, we don't own them, but we are the ones who are going to be servicing them as far as plowing them and taking care of them. And it is one of the only ones I mean, on that whole mile, between 11 and 12 mile, there's not one other space that's set back. And we show those documents to planning board, and that's why they had approved it, because it does look like it belongs to that building. And I actually had to talk to the city a couple times to figure out who actually owned that. The owners didn't even know who owned that property.
All right, if there's nothing else, I'm going to ask you to take a seat real quickly. I'm going to go ahead and open up the public hearing. Is there anybody in the audience who wishes to address the ZBA on this matter? Yes, ma'am.
Good evening. My name is Krista Pullen. I was a past resident of Bassett, and I will be a future resident in the upcoming months. As a past resident, it was a dirt road, and it's recently been paved. We had less traffic at the time when it was a dirt road, and now we're receiving more traffic. Also, if parking is allowed, Bassett is not wide enough to accommodate parking on both sides and allow 2 cars to pass. So my concern is safety for children and public, like ambulances and police officers aren't going to be able to pass through and access the road as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Way in the back. No, I'll get you next, ma'am.
Oh, that was way in the back?
It was further back than you were.
My name is Dan Stock. I'm at 1031 Vincetta. Got the postcard to come because of this. Just wanted to make sure that you understood. You asked the question about noticing that there's cars parked there now. It's clearly because Cruz and Mears is moved in. There's been a large increase of cars parking on the streets in that neighborhood because of the new restaurant coverage. All of those are, I would guarantee you, those are Cruz and Muir employees that are parked over there. They park in front of my house every day. Vincetta Boulevard has got a full block on both sides with their employees. They provide no on-site parking for their employees. They've shifted into our neighborhood. It's gonna be the same for these guys. If you do go with what they're trying to do now, they're gonna be crowded out by that. Keep it in mind.
Thank you, sir. Now you, ma'am, please.
John McNash.
Hi there, I'm Joan McNish. I own Honors, which is at 28142, next to the building that we're talking about. I've been there since 2000, and I've maintained that side, done all the plowing for 17 years. So I have 5 employees. During our busy time, we have 8, and that's where we park. So if this comes about, where are my employees going to park? We have 3 in the front of our building, and we also have 2 in the back. but we're fighting with what's going on right now because of the changes with Cruz and Muirs. And also, when new people move in, I'm constantly monitoring them to, we need room in the front for our customers to come and park and get their merchandise, et cetera. So I would have a hard time with this coming about because then I would have no place for my employees to park. They would have to park on the side streets, and that's going to become a nuisance for my neighbors. So that's my story.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Yes, sir.
Hello, my name is Mike McCulloch. I live at 1820 Bassett. I've lived there for over 25 years. I have to take issue with some of the things that the petitioner has told you tonight. There is parking behind the existing building. There's parking that's been there for over 25 years. I've seen it from my front step. And the employees that work there, Mary and others who work there, John, they would park behind the building, and they would allow the right-of-way along Bassett to be used for customer parking. I take issue with what the petitioner said when he said, oh, everybody thinks that parking belongs to the building. We've never thought that. It's always been in the public right-of-way. It's been available for people like Joan McNish, her customers to park, Motor City Carpet for their customers to park, and now Cruz and Muirs for their customers to park, and employees. I don't fault the Planning Commission for what they did back in August. I don't fault the planner for what he did back in August. Back then, you didn't know the impact that Cruz and Muirs was going to have. Cruz and Muirs opened up the weekend of Dream Cruise. This site plan was approved about the same time. We've got traffic now and parking on Vincetta that consumes a full city block. I understand there's a move afoot right now to get permit parking on Vincetta so the employees can't park there anymore. Well, where are they going to go? They're going to go to that right-of-way along Bassett. They're going to go on my street. They're going to park on both sides. They're going to block emergency vehicles. And I thought the whole point of planning was to anticipate problems and avoid them, not to create problems and then try to address them later. So I don't fault the planning department or the planning commission for what they did in August, but there is a problem today, and it's up to this board and it's up to the city to make sure that it's not exacerbated by the use of the right-of-way along this building. The other thing I want to bring up is I submitted a petition signed by nearly every resident on Bassett Road that says we object to this. It's an intensified use. The petitioner wants to intensify the use. I don't understand how the planning department counted the parking spaces for this use. The restaurant, according to the site plan, says 1,225 feet. If 200 square feet per parking space is required, that's 7 spaces. Then if the retail office next door, depends on what it is it retail or is it office? Because we have different formulas then. I count at least 6 spaces required. So that's 13 spaces that would be required for the use that's proposed here. So they want a waiver of well over half of the required spaces. And they don't have an answer as to how to address the Cruz and Muir traffic that's going to multiply on that spot when permit parking on Vincetta occurs. The other thing I wish to point out is that the alley behind Art Accents used to be one way, headed south. That sign has been removed, so now I presume it's two-way traffic. Maybe Mr. Murphy can address that. So now we have traffic going both ways from Bassett Road and Vincetta Road to Cruz and Muir's parking lot. You can imagine what it's going to be like with a carryout restaurant in that Art Accent building. And also with a carryout restaurant, you have much more traffic, more frequently. It's a shorter period of time, but there's more movement. So that would be improper too, I think, in my opinion. The other thing I wish to point out is in the site plan, and I brought this up to the planner earlier this week, the rear doors open up into those parking spaces. And I said, how can you do that? A car that's parked in front of those doors would block exit. And so the planner said, well, we can recess the doors and we'll locate the doors so they're located within the sidewalk and so forth. So the site plan is flawed from the beginning. So I urge the board to deny the variance. Deny the variance. Tell the developer or this petitioner to go back to the drawing board. Live within the means that are there. And don't use this Bassett right-of-way as what part of the property. It's the right-of-way. It belongs to everybody. And I guarantee you that when Cruz and Muir parking is forced onto Bassett, the problem will become even worse. So I'd ask you to consider the concerns of the neighbors who have lived there for decades.
Sir, I'll let you go a minute past. Try and wrap up, please.
Thank you very much. I don't have the timer working here. I'd otherwise pay
Yeah,
attention.
I've got mine working. I don't know why it's not controlling that. I think that
Well-
one's actually over there, but.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
All right, thank you, sir.
We'll finish up. The neighbors who have lived there for decades have asked the board to deny the variance. There's good reason to. Send this developer and the planning department back to the drawing table so they live within their means. If you approve this variance and Cruz and Muir employees and patrons park in that area, it'll become so congested, you'll be creating a much larger problem. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Anybody else? You'll get a chance to speak again after the public hearing, sir. Anybody else from the audience? Yes, sir.
David Dean, 1244 Fairlawn. Basically where Bassett ends, it runs into Fairlawn there. Right around the corner from Cruz and Muir's and all that parking galore going on there. Again, I hate to see the neighborhood there, my end of the block there, with a lot of traffic coming through, then they'll be cutting, people could be shooting down Bassett, doing a U-turn, turn around, trying to find parking spaces, parking along Bassett, going down towards Fairlawn. I already see what happened on Vincetta. Please take that into consideration. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Anybody else? All right, not seeing anybody, I'm going to go ahead and close the public hearing. I'm sorry?
You want to get the surgeon?
Yeah, sir, did you want to come back up and do you have something you want to say?
A couple things. First of all, I want to say, I understand all the concerns that the people came up here and said, but one thing I want to be clear, this structure already exists, and the parking's already there. So just like everybody else has those rights, that's one of the oldest buildings that's there. So if you want to look at which one has the rights, they have the right just like everybody else has the right. So it's not like we're taking an empty lot and saying, let's build a 2,500 square foot building to add to the parking issue there. One. Two, one of the ladies that originally came up said something about it's not wide enough to back up, and for homes and for double-side parking, you can't park on the other side anyway, because first of all, there's no residence for, I think, 200 feet when you go in, so there is no issue with any emergency vehicles going through that. There is no side parking on the other side of the road until you pass and to get into the residential. The residential portion is not this portion. And then also, majority of the concerns had to do with that restaurant. I mean, if Muir's is the issue, that can't be weighed onto us as far as what's going on there. And again, the thing is already approved for being split for 2 retail or office, which already require, I believe, 10 or 12 spaces anyway. So the difference, it's not like we're saying we have no spaces right now, we're creating an extra 10 spaces. The carryout restaurant that we're talking about is only 1,000 square feet. So, and if that doesn't get approved, there's going to be two things that are already allowed to be there anyway. So we are not creating an additional, right, obviously right now it's vacant right now, there's nothing there, but something is going to go in there. So, and their required space for any one of those, just like Motor City Carpet and all those spaces have required spaces, there's already required spaces that this is already a shortfall of anyway. So the difference, what we're doing is only creating 1 parking spaces, at the most 2 parking spaces as far as requirement between one use and another use. So that's all I wanted to say, and majority of the problems seems to come from Muir Restaurant, but I don't know why they're not being addressed with it and why it has anything to do with our property. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Bringing it back to this side of the table, can you speak to the difference in parking spaces that this use is driving versus if you were to sign off on something administrative as 2 office or retail uses? Specific
retail.
Retail, excuse me.
Would they both be qualified?
You'll see on the floor plan that's provided, the addition that's occurring is to accommodate things like the restrooms, which we would deduct. So right now, the restrooms are within the structure. There may be some other non-usable area like mechanical rooms and what have you. That's not depicted on that floor plan, but the floor plan that's currently associated with the building is less than the total square footage of what you see on the image to the right, because they're gaining additional square footage by building an addition, putting the restrooms and hallways on the back, all that non-usable. So they are changing the floor plan of the building itself. It's increasing the square footage of the usable floor area.
I know it's close, but.
Well, hold on, let us finish our discussion, sir. I guess what I'm trying to wrap my arms around, and just, you know, a couple hard numbers, I mean, as the site sits right now, if it was just to be split up, turned into 2 retail uses, what would the actual amount of spots that, you know, I know you have to sign off on it administratively because it already exists. But let's just say that was going in there brand new today, how many parking spaces would we require versus what is being proposed? I'm trying to get a feel for the impact of what this is doing.
We looked at it in totality.
Right.
But today, it's been recognized as retail, so we would, whether they were splitting it into 2, you would have additional non-usable floor area, because each would need its own restroom, each would need its own mechanical room, so you'd have a greater amount of non-usable floor area. But we would administratively approve this as a singular, no addition to the building.
Right.
As is, a singular tenant space for retail, or several tenant spaces too. Yeah, that's possible, correct.
So it's really the addition affecting this as well.
They're doing an addition. We're looking at in totality. They're creating 2, they really identified 3 potential uses. We've taken the most intense, the one being the carryout restaurant and the other being a retail.
Mr. Klatt.
But just looking at square footage, I think the applicant mentioned, it really is a 2-space delta. So if it is 25, 25 divided by 250, which be the best case, all retail, that's 10, right? If it was, as they're proposing, that's 12, so it's a 2-space delta, the way I look at it.
In that sense, you could. We looked at it again as the petitioner was scraping the existing floor plan clean to make it in the existing building entirely usable floor area and adding all that non-usable area, bathrooms, mechanical rooms, hallways to the rear with the addition. So we reviewed it in totality, fresh.
Any other questions?
Joseph, can you shed a light on the permit parking on Vincetta? My understanding is that they're coming in front of the commission at the next meeting, and it's been approved unanimously through the traffic committee, even to the fact that at the meeting, it was originally proposed to be from 4 p.m. to 2 a.m., and in the meeting, they changed it to permanently full-time. Now, I don't know that that's going to be approved by the commission, but I would, if I were a gambling man, I would probably bet that it will.
It's proceeding forward, and I'm sure there'll be a rather sizable audience at the city commission meeting.
I need to make a motion to deny this.
Motion by Mr. Kroll.
I'll support.
Support.
I guess my Woodward experience is vast. I've served 5 years on the west side in Berkeley on the ZBA, and I've spent 6 years over here. I also was on the address change liaison for the business community back in the 90s, and also a director on the Woodward Business Association. I've sensed many different variances on both sides of Woodward, and I don't know that I've ever seen one on Woodward without a parking variance needed. Obviously, Woodward is what it is. The reason for my denial tonight is knowing what's going on and living in that neighborhood and having insight into that neighborhood. I know that Mr. Cruz has tried to buy parking everywhere he can, and Vincetta Garage on the other side of the street has every available parking space tied up. So there isn't a massive parking. I guess another part of because I have this feeling that why am I penalizing these people for not being able to use this space? But in fact, as we've gone through this discussion tonight, the space is usable, and it's grandfathered, except when you change it, it's not grandfathered anymore, and then boards like us get to take a look at it and say, does this make sense? Quite honestly, I told Bill Cruz that he could use my street, which is just off Vincetta, for parking. But then I realized that when I moved in there 15 years ago, I had three kids, 2 doors down, 2 kids, and then 2 across the street. They're all 16, 17 now, have cars, and all their friends have cars, and they're in a parking space inside of my house. So we seem to have parking issues. You know, we are an urban suburb, I suppose, if you defined it. Woodward has certainly a series of problems, And I think I've been pretty liberal in my voting on Woodward, because if we're not gonna rip a few buildings down and put parking lots in, we're gonna have this in front of us over and over and over again. However, I do think in this particular situation with what's going on, there is nothing to stop Cruz and Mirror's employees from starting at that first space in Bassett and really coming all the way down in front of all these people's parking to the restaurant. They might have some tires slashed, but in reality, there's no legal position that anybody has to stop that. And I don't see another 9 parking spaces there right now. And I truly hope you go forward with the deal and find a good retailer in there. And thank you for knocking the sign down, because that's been pretty pathetic peeling and watching it peel. But I think right now we're just adding, we're throwing gasoline on a fire here.
My issue is, and I feel for anyone who's a owner or lease on Woodward, is the parking issue. My problem is there's no plan coming before us other than saying, hey, I'd like to split this, and one of it would be carryout. Well, that carryout can be different. If it's something like an all-day carryout that's high-intensive, there's going to be problems with the parking. If it's something low like donut shop where it's just in the morning, that's not going to be competing with all the parking that's being gobbled up by crews for lunchtime and dinner. So without knowing what's there, you're creating an intensity that could even be even worse. Say you get a nice coffee shop that everyone likes, whether it be Starbucks or someone else, and it really gets insane. So I have a real hard problem granting the variance without knowing what's going to go in there. And probably you could even come back once you have a better idea, even with the floor plans in those spaces, instead of being all blank and saying, hey, I don't need 6 and 7 originally. I only need, after I take out storage and stuff, we only need 3 or 4. But coming to us blank, it's hard for us to find a reason to grant it in my case.
Mr. Muller.
I think everybody was probably surprised by Cruz and Muir. And it didn't have to come before us, certainly, because it changed from a restaurant to a restaurant. No use change. Obviously, Cruz and Muir is far more popular than Vincetta Grill. I drove down Vincetta twice in the last week, in fact, and was astounded the first time I drove down with all the cars on Vincetta. I quickly understood. I mean, and Cruz and Muir actually has parking lots, and they overflow.
They're in formula.
Yeah. And here you've got these other businesses down to this gentleman's, and in reality, none of them have parking. Each of them have no more than, 2 or 3 parking spaces behind the building. All the ones in front don't count. All the ones on the side street there don't count. And anybody can use them, which means, so he has the misfortune, and he said it about almost like, hey, gee, they did it before me. Well, that happened. But he wants to change the use. And in changing the use, then they've got to come back to us to okay the parking. And there isn't a business on Woodward in all of Royal Oak that doesn't have this same problem. We go over it over and over and over. But I can't, at this point, especially seeing what's going on a block away, support this change when, also as Anthony said, we don't even know exactly what the change is and what the impact would be. He can use the building for what it was, and he's got that parking, and we can't stop him. But we can't say you can have a restaurant, or you can have this, or you can split it in half and need more parking. There isn't. So I won't be able to support the, issue.
Well, I will not be supporting the motion to deny it. I think there's 2 issues here that are kind of bothering me. I mean, and this petitioner is being penalized because he has the misfortune of being by Cruz and Muir, and I get that it's a mess, but he's a property owner as well, and he should be able to reasonably use and enjoy his property and lease it as he sees fit. And secondarily, I mean, and Mr. Klatzorder ran the numbers, we're really talking a 2-space change. And secondarily, he's going to be taking out that accessory building, whatever it is, and back and creating 3 now legal spots where 0 exists. So you could argue that he's actually creating a 1-spot improvement. The city itself, when they look at the plans that petitioners are presenting, they ask if it's a carryout and they apply a standard. I don't think it's correct for this body to say, well, if I knew it was a donut shop, I'd be okay with it, but if it's gonna be a Starbucks, forget it. The city has its standard. I don't think we should create a standard that goes above and beyond what the city creates. And I sort of see that happening here. And for that reason, I will not support the motion to deny. I think what he's proposing is reasonable. I think he should be able to use this property. He owns it. I'm sorry, the Cruiser is right there, and I have a feeling parking is gonna be spilling onto Bassett, even if this gets denied and turns into straight retail. And Bassett's probably gonna end up going for permit parking anyways. And I don't think all those things should happen at his expense, because those are things that are above and beyond his control. So I will not support the motion to deny.
Am I not seeing it right, though, that he's making the change? And the change is what makes more parking.
If you didn't make
If
change,
he
you wouldn't be here.
left the building as one unit, he wouldn't even be before us.
If he left the building exactly as is, he also wouldn't be creating those 3 spaces in back. He wouldn't be compelled to.
And I wouldn't care.
May I?
Yes, sir.
I'm searching for an ask for a change in use variance, and I don't see one. Do I see one, Joseph, or a change in use variance?
Well, the uses are allowed in that zoning district, so it's not.
Right, so we're not talking about a change of use. That's not before us. So what is before us is a variance on required parking. And I'm punching on my little calculator here, trying to figure out if this were retail and the 2,600 existing square feet had a couple of hundred non-usable, if it were 2,400 we're using as usable space, there's something like 9 or more required spaces which don't exist here. We've all covered this. Woodward doesn't comply. Woodward businesses. And the fact that somebody else made a problem is not this owner's, mistake here. Cruiser Muir Parking, I mean, God bless, they got a lot of business and that's great, but it's making more of a parking problem than already existed with the Vincetta Grill. But it's not these people's fault that exists. However, Mr. Kroll says it exists nonetheless. Yeah. So, but I don't think I can vote to deny this petitioner what everyone else on this street is enjoying, a variance from the fact that this parking doesn't exist on Woodward. So I won't support the denial of this variance.
Any other discussion?
Well, I too have a problem with straddling this owner with the problems caused by Cruz and Muir. However, he is dividing the property into 2 uses, and I think that's creating an additional problem that this area just doesn't need.
Ms. Anderson?
Now, I understand that 2 doesn't seem like a very big number, but in this instance, I think it is a big number, and it's adding to a problem that's getting bigger and bigger. And I just see that if they went back to the drawing board and maybe figured something out else, I don't know. I think it would, I just can't support it. Or I can support it.
I don't mean to talk out of turn, and I'm sorry that I'm talking.
So we're on this side of the table now, I'm sorry.
Carryout is less than retail. I didn't forget about that earlier, so sorry.
Mr. Clark, did I see your hand?
No.
Oh, I thought I saw a cough, all right. All right, is there,
Be denying it.
all right. Well, is there any other comments from the board on this issue? All right, not seeing any, I will call for the vote, which is a motion to deny the required or requested variance. All those in favor to deny signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
No.
No.
Noes, want to raise your hand for a moment?
Correct. So the motion to deny does pass. Okay, so then it is denied. I'm sorry, sir.
Sorry for talking out of turn.
All right, so that moves us along to, I'll let the room clear out a little bit here real quickly. That takes us to item D4, which is case number 171038, a public hearing on the appeal of Craig Daly and Maureen Dunphy, petitioners and owners for the following variances. A, waive 18 feet of the minimum required 35-foot north rear yard setback. B, waive the provision that limits eaves overhangs to a maximum of 2 feet into the minimum required setbacks to allow the eaves of the proposed addition to be 1 foot from the side property line and 13 feet from the rear property line to permit construction of a rear yard addition with 4-foot eaves to an existing single-family dwelling located at 2931 Vincetta. Mr. Murphy.
The subject property is improved with a single-family home and a carport. You'll see on the screen in front of you that it has, the house maintains a setback measured to the wall of the house, the outside wall of 5 feet, and it maintains a compliant rear yard setback at 41 feet. I'll flip to the proposal, which retains the 5-foot setback in addition to the rear. It reduces the rear yard setback from 41 feet to 17 feet, and the ordinance requires a minimum rear yard setback of 35 feet, so they're seeking a waiver. Now, the side yard setback for the home is compliant at 5 feet, and the ordinance allows for an overhang to project 2 feet into that 5-foot setback. You'll see from the elevations, the house, it has a little bit of unusual style in that there are 4-foot overhang, 4-foot eaves on the house, and obviously the petitioner wants to carry that same design feature with the addition. So at the 5-foot setback, eaves are only allowed to project 2 feet into that, meaning there's this distance from the eaves to the property line of 3 feet. But with a 4-foot eave, the distance from the eave to the property line is only 1 foot. So they need a waiver from those requirements as well.
Any questions? Yes,
So
sir.
just to confirm, the new 4-foot overhangs would basically align themselves with the existing overhangs that are there? And they're
Exactly.
just basically extending?
Yes, correct.
Mr. Kroll, do you have a comment? Okay, any other questions for Mr. Murphy at this point? Are the petitioners present? Please come forward. Good evening.
Good evening. Craig Daly and Maureen Dunphy, we are the owners of 293
And we're seeking the variance to just add a single room to the back of the house. We do have, as Joseph said, a rather unique home. It may be the only California ranch in Royal Oak. It is very environmentally sound with those overhangs. But they are large on the sides of the house. They're actually a little bit narrower. They're 2.5 feet in the front and the back, and that would be what was on the back of the addition as well. Because of the uniqueness of the house, the deed restrictions that are on our lot, and the size of the lot itself, we can't build up and we can't build out on either side. We're also set in the bank there, so we couldn't even build forward if we did want a master bedroom on the front of the house. That would not be available to us. And this came about why we have the kind of lot that we have is because in the mid-40s, there was one lot on Vincetta, the house that is to the west of us, that was divided into 9 lots by a developer. And not only were they divided from east to west, but the lot was split in half, like horizontally, between Vincetta and Webster. So other than we're due just west of Marywood, no one else on our block of Vincetta, other than those first 5 lots, would have this problem because their lots all run through to Webster, but ours don't. So while the addition is going to put us close to our backyard neighbors, we do have existing large shrubs, and the entrance to that addition would be on the east side, not on the back. We respectfully request that you grant the variance.
Are there any questions for the petitioner? Yes, sir.
So the carport, that's considered a structure though, correct?
Yeah.
I think so, yes.
So I guess, so in turn, could you build the addition where the carport is? Like, could you put the master suite addition where that is, potentially build a garage in front of that?
No, because we'd be then not compliant with where the bank, so we're built into the hill, as it's known, which was the bank of the Red Run, and we can't really come forward there. That would be a whole nother variance.
Come forward past the front of the house right now?
Mm-hmm.
Are you asking about behind the carport or?
No, I'm looking like right where the carport footprint is. It appears to be about maybe the same size as the addition you're planning. Like, could you simply fit that footprint where the carport is? And in the future, if you wanted to, place a garage in front of that.
That would be very strange, because then the house would be in an L. And I don't know how we would have access
Both of our doors are on the driveway. So the way we access our house right now, we have a front side door and a back side door that come off of that drive. It's a real challenging floor plan
Yeah, I didn't see
to
the
think
floor
about.
plan. That
So
was the
when
question I
our
had.
builder, who's John Graham at Total Construction, when he found out that this was a problem after we'd approved the plans, he came, and that was his first plan, was let's see what we can do with the carport, but we couldn't come up with a satisfactory answer to how that would work, and we would still get in our house. So the front of the house is an addition already, and it's all glass windows. You go back quite a ways. One of the entrances is off towards the middle of the carport, and one is just in front of it. So there'd be a problem getting into our house.
Well, thank you. I didn't see a full floor plan in your packet, so it's
yeah.
hard to tell how that would work with your
Well,
current plan.
Yeah.
It shows a piece of it, but not the full.
Sort of where that arrow is, right there, that's our front, that would be our front door.
Okay.
Is that our front door? It might be our front door, actually, because there's where the porch is, there's a little bit of recess part, and then the back door, then comes right under the carport, about in the middle.
Thank you.
Any other questions for the petitioner? All right, not seeing any, I'm going to ask you folks to take a seat real quickly so I can open up
Thank you.
the public hearing. Thank you. Is there anybody in the audience who would like to address the ZBA on this issue? All right, not seeing anybody, I'll go ahead and close the public hearing and bring it back to this side of the table. Mr. Kroll?
I will make a motion to approve this.
Motion?
Support.
Seconded by Mr. Muller. Any additional discussion?
I couldn't get a really good view of it from Webster, so I was actually sneaking around in the backyard. Oh, that was me, by the way. Yeah, that was me. Yeah, sorry. That happens to me sometimes. And I really couldn't find any reason that anybody would be upset with this. I always have a strategy to try to help people's dreams come true if it's not making a nightmare for the neighborhood. And I think this helps them immensely, and it certainly doesn't make a nightmare for the neighborhood, so that therein lies my thoughts.
This one really also falls into that, it's an odd lot. All the ones in Vincent are, the houses are put much further back than zoning would have allowed. We've often had ones where they were getting a variance when they were adding a porch on, not because it stuck out too far, but because it needed to come out another 30 feet. You know, it's the hill on the floodplain. It was a great place to put the houses. Therefore, you know, you've got this smaller backyard. They've got a unique house with those overhangs. And the doors on the side, yeah, you're not gonna do much. I just think this one falls into that category where it's just such a unique place, plus a unique architecture, that we should agree with the variance.
Any other comments? All right, seems like a pretty simple one. All those in favor of the motion to approve signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. You're all set. Thank you both. All right, that brings us down to our final case this evening, which is item number D5, case number 171039, public hearing on the appeal of KT Rentals LLC, petitioner and owner for the following variances: waive 1.75 of the minimum required 5-foot south side yard setback, waive 4.5 feet of the minimum required 35-foot east rear yard setback to demolish a carport and permit construction of an attached accessory structure, garage, and rear yard addition of living space located at 3406 Elmhurst.
We'll go through the setback provisions for this property before we get into the variances, because it's a uniquely shaped lot. It comes to essentially a point in the back. It's a pie-shaped lot as it flares out towards the public right-of-way. There's a provision in the ordinance where it's not burdened along the entire rear with the standard 35-foot rear yard setback. There's a provision that's essentially creates a mark in which we then apply a 35-foot setback, and that's outlined as you see in the report and on the screen in front of you in this orange line. And then as it wraps around the corner, the standard, which everyone's familiar with, the 5-foot setback applies as well. So this is essentially the setback regulations for this property, and the petitioner is proposing to demolish the existing carport and construct an attached garage essentially in the same place and add additional living space to the rear, and all of that's identified on the drawing in front of you in the hatched or the shaded area. When we apply the setback standards, the petitioner seeking a waiver from the rear yard setback of 35 feet, a waiver of 4.5 feet to project that additional living space into that rear yard setback, as well as portions of the additional living space and the attached garage portions would be within the minimum required 5-foot side yard setback. So they're seeking a waiver from that standard as well.
Any questions for staff at this point? All right, not seeing any. Are the petitioners present?
Good evening.
Good evening.
My name is Ken Trumbull. My wife and I own the property at 3406 Elmhurst. It's a very small house. It's about 750 square feet, 2 bedrooms, living room, kitchen that has a utility or laundry space in it. There is no basement. It's built on a slab. And the house is very, very small, very confining. We'd like to make it a little more amenable, a little more usable. It needs a little more space with regards to storage. That's part of the reason why we'd like to enclose the carport area and make it a garage. When you look at what we're trying to do in the back, we're just trying to make a utility mudroom area, something that allows us to move the washer and dryer out of the kitchen, open the kitchen up a little bit more, make it more amenable, make it more up to date. I don't think you could ever bring it into the 21st century, but get a little closer to it. And provide something that makes the house a little more functional. I know you've asked most of the people, what is your hardship? Our hardship is the shape of the lot. No matter what we try to do, we're going to infringe upon a variance in some way, shape, or form. You will see us, we will be in front of you. The problem is that we have tried a couple different options. We tried to put the area in, or the offset in the middle of the lot. Again, we still encounter the variance problem. We will always encounter the variance problem. We also end up occupying almost all of the middle of the lot, which means the lot now becomes unusable with respect to being able to enjoy the backyard area. With regards to where we have placed it, we've tried to get it in the least obtrusive area as possible on the back of the house. And unfortunately, you know, it does want to infringe on the side lot a little bit, but, you know, we'd like to ask that we do have we do get the variance in order to allow us to at least improve the property and make it a little more usable.
Any questions for the petitioner? Yes, sir.
Why, I guess it is just a small addition, but, so you didn't look at all putting it over by where the bathroom is?
We did. We looked at putting it in the middle. If you go through the documents that Mr. Murphy has provided, I also included a rear view and some addendums to that, which kind of shows you we did look at trying to put it in the middle. So this would be, if you're looking, you can see where the kitchen window is. Part of the problem we have is if we put it in the middle and it juts out, the kitchen window is completely blocked or obliterated from being able to see the backyard. So if you have children, you have something going on in the backyard, pretty much you've occupied the entire middle of the section of the backyard. With regards to where we're trying to put it, which is the orange space, again, we're trying to get it offset so that we maintain as much of the yard as we can. The yard, if you look at the plan view of the plot, again, the survey, if you look at it, you will see the triangular shape of the lot. I put something right in the middle. Basically, I've completely obliterated the entire backyard.
Any follow-up?
No. No, I was just gonna say, if that wall that lines the walk-in closet, it almost looks like if that would've gone straight back to where the laundry, of course, you lose that space, that might have been able to meet that 5-foot setback, at least for that portion, and it would just be the garage that would need the variance, but I understand if you're getting the garage variance, you might as well use that for the rest, so.
Any other questions? Yes, ma'am.
Have you had any discussions with the neighbor next to where the addition's going?
No, I have not.
Is that a security or privacy fence all along that side also? It looked like it was from the photo.
Yes, it is a 6-foot privacy fence.
Okay.
Any other questions? All right, that's Annie. I'm going to ask you to take a seat real quickly, just in case anybody wants to speak on the public hearing. Are you here to speak to us on this? Please come forward, sir.
Hi, I'm that neighbor. And I have really no problem with, the variance on the
Can you
garage.
introduce yourself, please?
Excuse me?
Introduce yourself for the record.
Gary Angus,
Thank
and I
you.
live at 3402 Elmhurst.
Appreciate that.
The only issue that we have in this section right here is that backyard is a lake, which floods my property just horribly. And I'm afraid if we take up more ground space in the rear, it floods the house. We've had water come in underneath the walls. I've put in drain fields out there to try and fight it off. I even installed one in his backyard because the water level just flows. I get 3 inches of water in my garage every spring. So that's the only issue as far as, if him and we don't talk. But if we can come up with some kind of way to get that water out of the backyard and keep from flooding and ruining my property, I got no problem with his additions. He can have the 1 foot variance for the carport. Doesn't bother me in a bit. We're really tight right there. As you can see, there's only 3 feet between that fence and the corner of his house. So that's the only issues I have.
Thank you, sir. All right. Since there's no,
Could I ask our architects here a question?
Sure.
well, let me just close the public hearing
Oh, I'm
real
sorry.
quick. And did you want to speak on this issue, ma'am? Okay, so I'll close the public hearing and Mr. Kroll, carry on.
Sorry.
You will get a chance, yes, sir.
Lost my train of thought. Oh, is adding buildings to the back increasing the water?
Yes.
Is there,
Because you have less soil to soak up water, therefore, the soil is what holds it before it lets go. You just have solid surface that spreads it out. Now granted, if theoretically in commercial times, a lot of times they take the drains and send it right out to the sewers, to have a direct line, that way you limit the amount of water that actually goes onto the surface. But this is a residential, so you usually don't ever see that in residential.
I guess you could look at downspout location too, where can we collect the water from the roof and
Rain
channel this away?
barrels and
But I don't know what your height above grade is. It's a slab on grade, so I assume you're pretty low to grade, so I don't really know how you could.
Well, how about we
Even
call the
mound it
petitioner
up.
back up and let him, did you have something you wanted to say about that issue, sir? Yeah, maybe you can give us a little guidance here so we're not speculating.
So first off, I would like to say, Gary, no problem, I work with you. That's not an issue. I will work with Gary. We have done, give you an example, the house I live in right now, we moved the driveway from one side to the other. When we did that, I actually used that driveway as water management to be able to get all that water out. We are going to replace the drive. All the cement in this house is gonna be redone. So when that's done, part of what we might be able to do is be able to work with the contractor to ensure that we actually use that as our water management to be able to get the water out and do our best to try to channel that out of the backyard. So absolutely no concerns with working with the neighbor and making sure that we do what we can to get the water out. If we have to run a drain or if there needs to be a dry well or something in the back, we do what we can to manage that. Because I don't want the water there either.
Okay, thank you for addressing that, appreciate that. All right, I'll bring it back to this side of the table again. Is there additional questions or discussion? Yes, sir.
I'll make a motion to grant the variances as requested.
We have a motion on the floor.
support?
Support by Mr. Curtis. Do you want to follow up, Anthony?
This is definitely a unique piece of property with some unique circumstances. So that I think those are the hardships he's trying to make better, not only his own house but also the neighborhood. So I don't have, although it is getting close to that line, I understand why he's doing that. So I'm fine with what he's requesting.
Any other comments? Yes, sir.
I can really find no reason not to approve this. I think it fits. I always look for minor things that we can do up here to help people really enjoy their homes in Royal Oak more. And I think this is asking for very little and really receiving a lot in return. So I like these kind of cases.
And I agree with you, and frankly, it was when I was reading through the report on this particular issue, and I started counting the 2 or 3 dozen sets of improvements that they'll be doing. I mean, they're really doing substantial justice, not just to this property, but all the surrounding properties are just gonna be that much happier with such an improved home, so I have no issue approving this. Any other comments? All right, not seeing any, I will go ahead and call for the vote to approve. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion passes, you're all set. Thank you all. All right, that brings us down to the end of our new business agenda. We do have one quick item of other business, which is the established holiday schedules, and making sure that we don't have any conflicts for next year. Is everybody good with the schedule as presented? Any conflicts? Do you need a motion to approve?
There's a motion, someone could simply make a motion to approve the motion that's presented.
Motion to approve as presented.
Second.
Motion supported. Any discussion? Seeing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? All right. Anything else for the good of the body, Mr. Murphy?
There's not, we do have a meeting next month. It's
One whole item?
Sorry.
One
You
item.
can't buy the petitioner a six-pack and push it back a month?
We'll see how many six-packs get passed around next month at their extra cost.
Then I guess we are looking for the mystery motion.
Move to adjourn?
Already did that.
It sounded like a question. Agreed.
You figure out who made the motion and who seconded it.
was that?
And I'm just gonna call for the vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned.